At my wedding reception, while the guests were still laughing and sipping champagne, my father-in-law, Martin, stood up from his chair. Without warning, he grabbed the microphone from the best man, his face set hard. I held Noah's hand under the table, feeling the pulse of excitement and nerves, unaware of what was about to happen. The barn glowed with fairy lights, the tables buzzed with conversation and celebration, and I was finally letting myself believe that happiness was ours to keep. Then Martin spoke, and the entire mood cracked like glass. "I think everyone here should know," he said, voice sharp and steady. "She's only after his money." The room froze. Forks hovered in midair. Conversations died. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me, their joy draining into confusion, shock, suspicion. I smiled, because crying would have given him power. I smiled through the sting in my throat and the shame climbing my chest. Noah gripped my hand harder, his whole body tensed beside me, but neither of us moved. Martin stood tall, certain, savoring every second of the silence he created. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to stand up and tell them who I really was. Not some gold digger, but a woman who had built her life back piece by piece after being left with nothing. But I didn't speak. In that moment, silence felt stronger than any words. The guests shifted uncomfortably. A few whispered. Most just stared. Then, quietly, Eli slid off his chair. My 8-year-old son walked, napkin still tucked into his shirt, toward the microphone. His small frame looked even smaller under the high beams of the barn, but his steps didn't falter. I half rose from my seat, heart hammering, but stopped when he turned and looked at me. His expression was calm, sure. He faced Martin, standing just a few feet away from the man who had humiliated his mother in front of everyone. "Grandpa," Eli said, his voice clear, "should I tell them what you did to Grandma?" The silence snapped. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the floor. Gasps echoed across the room. All the energy that had been pointed at me whipped around and landed squarely on Martin. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face drained of color. For the first time that night, I wasn't the one on trial. The truth, buried for years, was clawing its way into the light. And it wasn't me it would destroy. The morning of the wedding, the world outside my window glowed with a soft golden light. The field stretched wide and open, dotted with wildflowers swaying under a gentle breeze. It was the kind of morning that felt like a promise. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the simple pearl earring Noah had given me, feeling a nervous energy buzz just under my skin. I never imagined I would get a second chance at love, much less a second chance that felt this pure. After my first marriage crumbled under lies and loneliness, I had convinced myself that fairy tales were for other people. I had learned to build a life for Eli and myself with my own hands, brick by painful brick. Then Noah happened. I met him when I was hired to redesign the interiors of his architecture firm's new office space. He was thoughtful, always asking about my ideas, always listening, like what I said mattered. Over coffee breaks and late nights measuring floor plans, friendship bloomed into something stronger, something fierce and undeniable. He made me believe again, not with grand gestures, but with the way he remembered my favorite tea, or the way he laughed at my son's corny jokes like they were the best thing he had ever heard. Noah never tried to fix me. He just stood by me, steady and sure. Eli adored him almost instantly. They built Lego castles together, fought epic battles with foam swords in the backyard, and whispered secrets about how they were going to build me a treehouse one day just because. Watching them bond made my heart ache in a way that felt almost holy. But not everyone was happy. Martin, Noah's father, never made it a secret that he thought I was beneath their family. In his eyes, I was a single mother with nothing to offer but a pretty face and an empty bank account. His smiles were thin, his compliments sharper than insults. At the rehearsal dinner, he kept his distance, clinking glasses with old business partners, avoiding our table entirely. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself the only approval I needed was Noah's and Eli's. Still, a small knot of unease twisted in my stomach whenever I caught Martin watching me from across the room, his expression unreadable. The venue was everything I had dreamed of, simple and beautiful, a restored barn draped with white linen and strung with fairy lights, surrounded by towering oak trees that looked like silent guardians. Tables were laid out with blush-colored roses and gold-rimmed china. There was a warmth to it, a softness that felt like home. I wore a dress that floated when I moved, nothing extravagant, just lace and satin that felt like it belonged to me. Noah wore a navy suit with a white rose tucked into his lapel. When I walked down the aisle and saw the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the world, all the fear and doubt melted away. Our vows were simple and honest, promises built on the hard, messy beauty of real life. We promised to fight for each other, to listen, forgive. Eli stood beside us, holding the rings, grinning so wide I thought his face might split in two. During the cocktail hour, laughter filled the air. Old friends reunited. New friendships sparked. Plates clattered, music played, children chased each other barefoot across the grass. For a little while, it felt like every scar I carried had faded into something invisible, something weightless. When it came time for the speeches, I leaned into Noah's side, feeling completely at peace. The best man joked about Noah's terrible cooking. My maid of honor told a story about how we used to dream about our weddings when we were teenagers, laughing at how different the reality turned out to be. I caught Martin out of the corner of my eye, sitting stiffly at his table, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. I thought maybe, just maybe, he would sit quietly and let us have this night. I was wrong. When Martin stood up and took the microphone, a ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. People turned their heads. A few clapped politely, expecting a formal, slightly awkward father of the groom toast. Instead, he shattered everything with a single sentence. Now, sitting here, the weight of the moment pressing down on my chest, I realized the truth. This was not just a speech. This was a strike, a deliberate attempt to tear me down in the moment I was most vulnerable. And for a moment, it almost worked. Until Eli, with his small, steady steps, reminded me that the strongest love in the room was not the love that tried to control, but the love that chose to stand up no matter how small or scared you might be. Martin's words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. She's only after his money. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The band stopped tuning their instruments. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye in the room shifted toward me, not with kindness, but with confusion. Suspicion, pity. I sat frozen, my hand clenched tightly around Noah's. His knuckles were white. I could feel his body tense beside me, a storm barely contained. I wanted to speak, to laugh it off, to stand up and tear his accusations apart, but the words caught in my throat. I had prepared for so many things on this day. This moment was not one of them. Noah rose halfway from his chair, but Martin kept talking. His voice, calm and measured, filled the barn like smoke. "My son has always had a big heart," Martin said, looking directly at Noah, then sweeping his gaze across the guests. "Too big. It blinds him to what people really want from him." Murmurs stirred at the tables. Friends glanced at each other, unsure whether to stay seated or intervene. A few looked at me, their eyes apologetic, but most just waited to see what would happen next. I felt my breath coming quicker, shallow and sharp. My wedding dress, so light and beautiful hours ago, now felt like a net tightening around my chest. Martin raised his glass slightly as if offering a toast, his smile razor thin. "Here's to seeing things clearly before it's too late." He sat down, the microphone clattering against the table as he dropped it. The sound echoed in the stunned silence. I stared down at my plate, my vision swimming. A cherry tomato had rolled off my salad and sat at the edge, perfectly untouched, absurd in its normalcy. Around me, the world spun, but that tomato stayed perfectly still. Noah turned to me, his face red with anger, but soft when he looked into my eyes. "I am so sorry," he whispered. His voice shook with rage and heartbreak. I shook my head. I did not want him to be sorry. I did not want him to feel shame for someone else's cruelty. I sat up straighter. I lifted my chin. If Martin wanted to humiliate me, I would not give him the satisfaction of crumbling. I opened my mouth, ready to speak, to defend myself with every ounce of strength I had left. But before I could say a word, Eli moved. From the next table over, where he had been sitting with my sister and her kids, Eli stood up. He wiped his hands on the front of his pants, brushing away invisible crumbs, and began walking toward the front of the room. At first, I thought he was just coming to find me, looking for comfort the way children do when things get scary. I half rose from my chair, ready to scoop him up, to protect him from the ugliness swirling around us. But he did not come to me. He walked straight to the microphone. A hush fell over the room as everyone turned to watch him. A small boy in a navy vest and clip-on tie, standing alone under the harsh overhead lights. He reached up, adjusted the microphone carefully, and looked at Martin. "Grandpa," Eli said, voice steady. "Should I tell them what you did to Grandma?" The words, so clear and simple, sliced through the tension like a blade. There was a sharp intake of breath from the guests. A wine glass tipped over at a nearby table, the red liquid bleeding into the white linen. Someone gasped aloud. A woman clamped her hand over her mouth. Martin's face, smug a moment ago, turned ashen. He opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came out. He looked at Eli, then at the guests, as if trying to gauge just how much the boy knew. The answer was written in every horrified face, staring back at him. I sat frozen, torn between pride and panic. Eli stood there, small but unshaken, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. He did not shout. He did not cry. He simply stood his ground, shining a light so bright that not even Martin's lies could survive it. Noah moved first. He stood up, walked over to Eli, and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. His eyes never left his father's. "You heard him," Noah said, his voice calm but full of steel. "Maybe it's time we all heard the truth." The guests sat stunned, eyes darting between Martin and Noah, between the past and the present, between what they thought they knew and the ugly truth unfolding before them. And for the first time since Martin opened his mouth, I smiled. Not because the pain was gone, not because the moment was easy, but because we were no longer alone. Martin sat there, stiff and silent, while the weight of Eli's words settled over the room like a thick fog. His hands, once steady around his glass, trembled slightly against the tablecloth. The man who had been so quick to judge, so eager to shame me, now looked cornered, exposed. Noah knelt beside Eli, speaking quietly enough that only those closest could hear. "You are so brave," he said. "You did the right thing." Eli nodded once, his face serious. He did not fidget. He did not waver. I rose from my chair, smoothing my dress with shaking hands, and walked to them. I gathered Eli into my arms, feeling the steady, solid beat of his heart against mine. Noah stood too, wrapping his arm around both of us, creating a shield, a small, unbreakable circle. Martin's voice broke the silence, rough and defensive. "He's just a child," he said, his words stumbling. "He doesn't understand what he's talking about." Noah straightened. His voice carried across the room, not loud, but firm. "Then maybe you should explain it to us," he said. "Explain what he heard. Explain why my mother was scared to come home after her surgery. Explain why she cried on the phone to me that night, begging me to stay on the line because she was afraid to be alone with you." Gasps rippled across the tables. Guests whispered behind their hands, shifting in their seats, glancing from Martin to me to Noah. I held Eli tighter, my eyes never leaving Martin's. He stood up suddenly, knocking over his chair with a harsh scrape against the wood floor. His face twisted in anger, but there was fear, too, naked and obvious. "This is a family matter," Martin snapped, "not something to air out in front of strangers." "No," Noah said. "Family matters are built on trust, respect, love. You threw all that away long before tonight." For a second, I thought Martin would storm out, would turn and disappear into the night, leaving behind nothing but rumors and wreckage. But he stayed rooted to the spot, stubborn, defiant, too proud to run but too exposed to fight back properly. From one of the front tables, Uncle David, Martin's younger brother, rose to his feet. He was a quiet man, always lingering at the edges of family events, always keeping his head down. But tonight, something in him had shifted. "I heard it too," Uncle David said, voice trembling with emotion. "I was there the night you told Lily she was a burden, that you wished the stroke had finished the job. I never said anything because I thought it would tear the family apart. But you already did that yourself." The words hit like a crack across stone. Martin paled. His mouth opened and closed, searching for some defense, some way to spin it, but none came. The guests stared at him now, not with confusion, but with disgust. Murmurs grew louder, shifting into anger, disbelief, even pity for the woman he had failed so completely. The wedding planner, sensing the disaster unfolding, quietly motioned to the security team near the entrance. 2 men in black suits approached the back of the room, professional and discreet, waiting for the signal. Noah looked at them, then back at Martin. "I think you should leave," he said. "You are not welcome here." Martin looked around, perhaps realizing for the first time that no one would defend him, no one would excuse him, no one would pretend it had not happened. With stiff, jerky movements, he grabbed his coat from the back of his chair and walked toward the door. No one clapped. No one called after him. The heavy wooden doors closed behind him with a deep, final thud. Silence lingered for a beat longer. Then Noah turned to the guests, his voice steady but full of raw, honest emotion. "This woman," he said, looking at me, "is the love of my life. She is not here for anything but my heart, and I am proud beyond anything to call her my wife." I felt the tears well again, but this time they were different, not from shame, but from overwhelming, searing love. The guests rose to their feet. Applause filled the barn, not the polite clapping of a formal event, but something louder, fuller, real. People cheered. Some wept openly. In the middle of it all stood Eli, the smallest among us, the bravest among us, holding my hand tightly, and I realized this was not just a wedding anymore. This was the moment we reclaimed our family. As the heavy doors shut behind Martin, a weight lifted from the room. It was not immediate, not easy, but the shift was there, like a deep breath no one realized they were holding. For a moment, everyone stood still, caught between the wreckage of what had just happened and the question of what would come next. Noah turned toward me, his eyes shining not with anger, but with love, fierce and unwavering. He stepped forward, took both of my hands in his, and leaned in, until only we existed in the space between the whispers and the clinking glasses. "I love you," he said, his voice clear and strong. "Nothing anyone says, nothing anyone does will ever change that." Tears filled my eyes, but this time I let them fall. I was not ashamed. I was not embarrassed. I was standing in the middle of a room full of people who had just seen the worst someone could throw at me, and I was still standing, stronger than before. Noah kissed me gently, right there in front of everyone, sealing a promise that had nothing to do with appearances or approval. Eli clutched my hand, beaming up at us. His smile lit up his whole face, so proud, so certain. In his small way, he had protected us more fiercely than anyone else could have. From the back of the room, my sister Callie started clapping. It was a small sound at first, almost hesitant, but it grew. One by one, guests joined in, some smiling, some wiping away tears. The applause rolled through the barn, not polite, not forced, but real, warm, alive. The band, after a quick, uncertain glance at Noah, struck up the first song we had picked together for the reception. The soft opening chords of "Stand By Me" filled the air, rich and steady, a heartbeat pulsing through the chaos. Noah held out his hand to me. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Whitmore?" he asked, grinning. I laughed, shaky but real, and placed my hand in his. We moved to the center of the floor. The guests formed a wide circle around us, giving us space, offering silent support. The fairy lights above swayed gently in the breeze coming through the open barn doors. The scent of roses and summer grass filled the air. As we danced, Noah whispered in my ear, "You and me. No one else matters." I tightened my arms around him, feeling the solid truth of his body against mine, the absolute certainty in his words. Halfway through the song, Eli joined us, wrapping his arms around my waist. Without hesitation, Noah bent down, scooped him up, and held him between us. The three of us spun slowly under the lights, laughter mixing with the music. Around us, the reception began to heal itself. Friends and family returned to their tables. Conversations restarted, now brighter, freer. Children darted back onto the lawn, chasing each other through the dusk. Plates refilled, glasses clinked again, and life moved forward, refusing to be poisoned by one bitter man's hate. My Aunt Mara approached with a soft smile and pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek. "You are exactly where you're meant to be," she whispered. Later that night, as the stars came out and the party spilled onto the cool grass outside, people came up to us in waves. Some apologized for Martin's behavior. Others shared quiet words of encouragement. Many simply hugged us, no explanations needed. I realized then that moments of cruelty do not define us. How we rise afterward does. Eli stayed close to my side the entire evening, his small hand finding mine whenever the crowd became overwhelming. I bent down and kissed the top of his head. "You saved me today," I said softly. He looked up at me, confused. "I just told the truth," he said simply. Sometimes the purest courage comes from the smallest voices. When the night finally ended and we drove away under a tunnel of sparklers, I looked back at the barn glowing behind us. I felt no sadness, no lingering fear. I had walked through the fire with the people I loved most, and we had come out stronger. This was our beginning, and nothing, no whisper of hate, no shadow of doubt, would ever take it from us. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with sunlight streaming through the windows, and Eli snuggled against my side. Noah's arm was draped over both of us, his steady breathing grounding me in the soft quiet of a new beginning. For a long moment, I stayed still, letting the weight of everything settle. The chaos of last night, the pain, the public humiliation, it could have broken us. Instead, it revealed something stronger than I ever imagined. Later, over coffee on the back porch, Noah wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and pulled me close. The world beyond the fields was waking up. Birds sang. The grass shimmered with dew. Everything felt raw but clean, like a storm had passed and left the air sharper, more honest. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," Noah said, his voice low. "You didn't deserve any of it." I leaned into him. "I'm not sorry," I said. "Not anymore." It surprised me how much I meant it. If Martin had kept silent, we might have lived years under a cloud of quiet disapproval, always wondering what would be said behind closed doors, always guarding our happiness like it was fragile. Instead, the worst had been dragged into the open. The ugliness had been seen, named, and rejected, not just by us, but by everyone who mattered. Noah kissed my forehead, and we sat there in the golden morning, knowing we had earned this peace. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. Friends who had once stayed at the edges of our lives moved closer. Invitations arrived for family dinners, birthday parties, game nights. People who had seen the truth for themselves no longer treated us like outsiders. Even Uncle David, who had once kept his head down to keep peace, reached out. He took Noah aside at a family barbecue one afternoon and apologized for staying silent so long. He promised that things would be different now, and they were. Martin's absence created a space that filled with better things: honesty, support, real connection. The family stopped walking on eggshells. Stories about Lily, once told in hushed voices, came pouring out. People remembered her laughter, her kindness, her fierce love. And through it all, Eli grew. He asked questions about truth and bravery. We answered them the best we could. Always honest, always careful to show him that telling the truth is not about punishment, but about healing. One evening, as I tucked him into bed, Eli looked up at me and said, "I was scared when I said it. I thought maybe you would be mad." I brushed his hair back from his forehead. "I could never be mad at you for telling the truth," I said. "You were braver than most grown-ups that night." He smiled, a small, proud smile, and closed his eyes. Watching him drift off to sleep, I realized that this, more than anything, was the life I wanted. Not perfect, not free from pain, but real, built on foundations that could survive storms. Months later, when Noah officially adopted Eli, the judge asked if Eli had anything he wanted to say before signing the papers. Eli, standing between us in his best button-up shirt, nodded solemnly. "I just want to say," he said, "that Noah has always been my real dad, even before today." The judge smiled, and there was not a dry eye in the room. As we walked out of the courthouse, hand in hand, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing us in light. It felt like a sign, but maybe it was simply the truth we already knew. Family is not built by blood alone. It is built by choice, by love that stands up when it matters most, by the courage to tell the truth, even when your voice shakes. That day, at the reception, when Martin tried to tear us apart, he gave us something without meaning to. He forced us to show exactly who we were, to each other and to everyone else. We were not broken by his words. We were forged by them. Because of that, we walked forward into a future that was not only ours, but stronger, braver, and more beautiful than anything we had ever dreamed. Thank you for listening to my story. If this touched your heart, if you believe that truth and love always win in the end, please take a moment to like this video. It helps more than you know. I would love to hear your thoughts too. Share your story, your support, or even just a few kind words in the comments below. I read every single one. If you know someone who needs a reminder that courage can come from the most unexpected places, please share this video with them. You never know who might need it today. And if you want to hear more real stories about love, family, and the battles we fight to protect them, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. This is just the beginning, and I would be honored to have you with me for every step of the journey. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in second chances. I'll see you in the next video.